Unemployed Councils in St. Petersburg, Indiana, 1906. Biographical note: Early life and political awakening. Sergei Malyshev was born in 1881 to a poor peasant family and was brought to St. Petersburg at age 8 to be a shopkeeper's apprentice. As he grew older, he desired to work in industry and became a factory worker. He joined the Bolshevik organization in St. Petersburg before the First Russian Revolution and was an active worker, leading to frequent persecution by the Tsarist government. He was often imprisoned, exiled, or living as an outlaw, but always continued his party work. Role in the 1905 Revolution. The 1905 Revolution found Malyshev in the textile center of Kostroma, where he was elected chairman of the first Kostroma Soviet of Workers' Deputies. After the revolution was crushed, he fled to St. Petersburg. This pamphlet details his work during this period. Later life and motivation for writing. After 1908, he again faced severe repression from the Tsarist government and lived as an outlaw for many years. He was an active participant in the October Revolution and held many responsible positions afterward. The complete elimination of unemployment in the Soviet Union prompted him to write his memories of the struggle under the former Tsarist regime. Mass unemployment of 1905 to 1906, and the organization of the Council creation of the Unemployed Council. In April 1906, following the suppression of the First St. Petersburg Soviet of Workers' Deputies and the Moscow Armed Uprising, a group of Bolsheviks created the St. Petersburg Unemployed Council to organize the masses of locked-out workers. This organization fought the government and bourgeoisie for over 2 years before being destroyed by the secret police in 1908. The lockout. In late October 1905, the government and bourgeoisie initiated a massive lockout, closing all state and private factories and mills to punish revolutionary workers. This threw hundreds of thousands of workers and their families into hunger and poverty across Russia's industrial cities. The lockout in St. Petersburg continued until April 1906. Government repression. Beyond the lockout, the government organized gangs called the Black Hundreds to attack workers' organizations and individuals with rifles and bombs. However, these attacks only motivated workers to strengthen their self-defense organizations, and the Black Hundreds were severely repulsed. Profile of the unemployed. When the newly formed Unemployed Council registered the locked-out workers, it found that the capitalists had targeted the most skilled and active members of the working class. The registration showed that 54% were highly skilled metal workers, 18% were other skilled trades like joiners and carpenters, and only 21% were common laborers. Initial relief efforts. At first, the Soviet of Workers' Deputies managed the crisis. A commission for the unemployed was organized, which opened dining rooms and provided financial relief. 30 kopecks a day for adults and 10 to 15 kopecks for children. Funds were raised by deducting 1% from the wages of employed workers and through voluntary collections. Demands on the City Duma. The Soviet of Workers' Deputies sent a delegation to the St. Petersburg City Duma with a list of demands, including regulating the food supply, providing buildings for meetings, and releasing public funds to support the workers' cause. The Duma's rejection. The delegation arrived on October 16th to find the Duma building filled with armed police and soldiers. Most town councilors, having been warned, did not attend the session. A small committee received the delegation, dismissed them, and then refused all their demands. The Duma was composed of powerful capitalists and their representatives, who were the very people who had locked out the workers. Starvation among the unemployed increases worsening conditions. By January 1906, unemployment and hunger had grown more intense. The Commission for the Unemployed had no money, and locked out workers, having sold their last belongings, faced starvation. Malyshev's arrival in St. Petersburg. After the uprising in Moscow was defeated, Malyshev was forced to flee Kostroma. Comrades, who were railroad workers, helped him escape on a locomotive. He went to St. Petersburg, the center of the Bolshevik Party, to report on events and hide underground. Introduction to the unemployed movement. Upon arrival, Malyshev met a comrade, Simon Lokhtev, who told him that the Bolshevik leaders had decided to fully support the growing unemployed movement. He was invited to a meeting of deputies from district organizations of the unemployed that very evening. Observations of social inequality. Before the meeting, Malyshev and Loktev walked through the city center, observing the stark contrast between the well-fed, contented bourgeoisie shopping and riding in magnificent carriages and their own hunger and poverty. They could only afford a cheap meal of tripe for 2 kopecks. How the Unemployed Council was organized. The initial meeting. The meeting took place in a country house in Lesny, attended by delegates from the unemployed, most of whom were active Bolshevik workers blacklisted by the factories. The chairman, a representative of the St. Petersburg Bolshevik group, reported that the funds for the unemployed were exhausted and the situation was desperate, with landlords throwing families into the streets. A call for public works. The speaker, representing the Bolshevik group, proposed a new strategy: to organize all the unemployed into a strong body called the Unemployed Council. The council's chief goal would be to move beyond charity and demand that the City Duma organize large-scale public work. He argued that the unemployed were not paupers and demanded bread and work. He suggested focusing on projects like the construction of tramways. Formation of the council. The delegates unanimously adopted the proposals. They decided to hold elections at the dining rooms to form a council of 30 delegates from the unemployed. The elections were carried out quickly, and Comrade Kersky was elected president of the new council. The council's immediate task was to get the city to organize public work for all the unemployed. Lenin's intervention. Malyshev and Kersky reported their progress to Lenin. Lenin advised that the council was not strong enough on its own and needed broader support. He insisted they must immediately extend the council to include representatives from all the factories and mills of St. Petersburg to create a genuine proletarian leading body that could successfully pressure the City Duma. Expansion and structure. Following Lenin's suggestion, the council was expanded to include 30 delegates from the large factories. It was then further enlarged by organizing district councils across the city. The final structure included an executive committee and a general city meeting. District councils consisted of 1 delegate for every 250 workers, elected at general meetings. The unemployed attacked the St. Petersburg City Duma, mobilizing the masses. Under the leadership of the Bolshevik Party, the Unemployed Council began preparing for an offensive on the City Duma. A forceful petition was drafted, discussed, and then circulated in all factories and mills to gather worker signatures. The petition's demands. The petition declared that workers do not want charity, but demand work. It stated that public funds should be used for public needs and demanded that the City Duma immediately organize public work with adequate wages for all unemployed workers. It ended with a clear threat: if you do not accede to our demands, we will report your refusal to the unemployed, and then you will not have us to deal with, but those who sent us, the masses of unemployed. Gaining public support. The council successfully used factory gate meetings to rally employed workers behind the cause. It also managed to get a number of liberal newspapers to publish articles supporting the unemployed and advocating for public work. As the middle class feared the spread of disease and crime from 100,000 starving people, the Mensheviks fight against the unemployed organization's opposition within the party. As the Unemployed Council's influence grew, the Mensheviks began to actively oppose the work. They campaigned in the districts to disrupt the organization, but their efforts failed as they found no support among the workers. Menshevik arguments. In the St. Petersburg Party Committee, the Mensheviks argued that the Bolshevik-led council was a stunt and was provoking workers to premature action. They specifically demanded the removal of the threatening concluding words from the petition and opposed sending a delegation to the Duma at all. Key disagreements. The Mensheviks also opposed the demand for public work, claiming it was the state's responsibility, not the city's. Crucially, they fought against the election of representatives from factories, seeing it as a revival of the Soviet of Workers' Deputies. Bolshevik defiance. The Menshevik leaders threatened to expel the Bolsheviks from the party if they persisted. The Bolshevik leaders of the unemployed movement declared that such a decision would be harmful, and they would not submit to it. The issue was postponed, but by the time the committee met again, the Bolsheviks had already achieved a victory at the City Duma, which caused a split in the Menshevik ranks. The first organization of the unemployed in the St. Petersburg City Duma, first attempt. March 28, the Unemployed Council sent a delegation of 15 members to the City Duma on March 28. The delegates refused to speak with the mayor alone, insisting on addressing the entire Duma. However, informed of the delegation's arrival, most town councilors had deliberately stayed away, so there was no session. Second attempt, April 12, the council used the next 2 weeks to renew its agitation and gather more support. On April 12, 1906, a delegation of 30 people, 15 from the unemployed and 15 from employed, went to the Duma. The Duma, having held a private session beforehand, decided to admit the delegation and concede to their demands to avoid exasperating the workers. Confrontation in the Duma. 5 representatives spoke for the council, using confrontational language. One speaker said, "We ask nothing of you, we demand," while another warned, "If you do not give work to the unemployed, nothing remains to us but to rob you." When the delegates refused to leave the hall without an answer, the councilors called an intermission before resuming the session with the delegation present. The Duma's concessions. A left radical councilor read the council's estimates, proposing work for approximately 5,000 people on various construction and labor projects. Faced with overwhelming public pressure, the Duma unanimously adopted a resolution to set up a special committee to organize public work, which would include workers' representatives. Immediately advance 500,000 rubles to begin the work. Negotiating representation. After the session, the commission chairman, E.N. Kedrin, suggested the workers nominate 3 representatives. The delegates refused, demanding a number of representatives equal to that of the town councilors, with the right to vote. After Kedrin initially refused and the delegation began to walk out, he relented and accepted their proposal. At the round table with the bourgeoisie, initial actions. The day after the successful confrontation with the Duma, the new city commission, which included representatives of the unemployed, began its work. Its first tasks were to investigate the existing aid being given to the unemployed and to find ways to increase the number of dining rooms. The commission decided to take action to help unemployed workers pay their rent, as many families had been broken up, with children sent to live with employed comrades. It also agreed to help workers redeem essential belongings from pawnshops, such as sewing machines and underwear. Funding and distribution. Of the 500,000 rubles allocated by the Duma, the commission set aside 175,000 rubles for immediate needs like food, rent, and pawnshop redemptions. This plan was approved by the Duma on April 21st. The Duma also agreed to allow the commission to exempt the unemployed from certain local rates and to forbid municipal pawnshops from selling their unredeemed property before June 21st. Organization of relief. The Unemployed Council decided to let the Union of Engineers, which had an existing committee for helping the unemployed, handle the distribution of the money. The council, however, retained the right to control the committee's activity and provide general management. The Committee for Feeding the Unemployed opened 33 dining rooms and provided 3 million dinners over its period of operation, with daily distribution reaching 16,000 to 20,000 dinners in June and July. The City Duma finances strikes diverting funds. The Unemployed Council had a hand in organizing strikes, but the trade unions were too weak to support the strikers financially. The council ingeniously used the money provided by the City Duma for rent relief to fund these strikes. A close call. Malyshev recounts an incident where he submitted a list of 500 people in the Vyborg district to receive rent money from Councillor Shnitnikov. The list included needy strikers from the Ericsson factory. Just before the money was distributed, Malyshev learned that 100 of the strikers on the list had returned to work as strikebreakers. To ensure the money didn't go to them but was still claimed, other strikers were told to memorize the strikebreakers' names and answer when they were called. The plan unravels. The plan almost worked, but one woman, when called for Petrova, mistakenly answered, "I am not Petrova, I am Samoilova," before correcting herself. The lawyer Shnitnikov immediately realized something was wrong and accused Malyshev of criminal and Bolshevik doings. He seized the remaining money and ran out of the room. Systematic deception. Despite this incident, the council regularly used this method to support major strikes, including those of the dockers, cabmen, and the Ericsson telephone factory, with the Duma's funds. Because many of the unemployed were illiterate and signed for money with a cross, the accounts were difficult to check, which enabled the council to divert the funds. Years later, a Duma official questioned Malyshev about why all the crosses on the receipts looked the same, but accepted the explanation that the workers' heavy labor made their signatures similar. The audit commission eventually filed the accounts away, unable to make sense of them. Organization of public work delayed shifting attitudes. After the initial victory, the City Duma began to change its attitude. The cadets and Black Hundreds, who had initially seemed eager to help, started to obstruct the organization of public work, hoping to limit the aid to the initial 500,000 rubles. The commission chairman, the lawyer Kedrin, was instructed by capitalists to delay any decision on public work. The Artel dispute. The unemployed council, with the help of sympathetic technicians, found projects in the Duma's files worth 5,600,000 rubles. However, the commission insisted that the unemployed organize themselves into artels, cooperative work groups, and take on the work as private contractors. The commission argued a legal entity had to be responsible for such large sums. Bolshevik rejection. The Bolsheviks and the unemployed council leadership realized that the artel system was a trap. They feared that the workers would be unable to manage the contracts, might spoil some jobs, and give the Duma a pretext to stop all public work. Therefore, the council categorically rejected the artel contract basis and instead demanded that the City Duma take full responsibility for carrying on the work. They insisted on several conditions, including an 8-hour day, a daily wage, and the right for the council to control hiring and internal affairs. A new delay stalemate and propaganda. The council's rejection of the artel system exasperated the City Duma. The capitalist press began to attack the Bolsheviks, claiming they were using the unemployed for political aims. By the beginning of June, the organization of public work had not progressed. The Duma did not grant fresh funds for relief, and rumors spread that the Ministry of the Interior had ordered the Duma not to make concessions. Growing impatience. As weeks passed with no action, the unemployed grew impatient and demanded that the council take more effective steps. The Duma's executive commission grew so bold that it stopped inviting the council's representatives to its meetings. The council tried to prevent any provocative actions by individual groups while continuing to pressure the Duma. A call for calm. On June 10, 1906, the council issued a leaflet to all workers in St. Petersburg. It stated that the Duma was only playing with the unemployed and that its goal was to provoke the workers to premature action. The leaflet warned the workers not to fall into the trap, urging them to remain calm and not take any drastic action until the council called for it. The unemployed invade the Duma a third time, a secret plan. The unemployed council decided to send another delegation to the Duma on June 12, keeping the plan a complete secret. A delegation of about 80 members was to enter the Duma hall simultaneously from 2 different doors and block the exits. The invasion. The plan was mostly a success, but one group was a minute late. This left one door unguarded. And as soon as the town councilors saw the first group of workers enter, the chairman adjourned the session, and they all rushed for the exit. Just then, the second group of workers appeared, trapping the panicked councilors. The Duma chairman, Dimsha, tore off his chain of office and tried to flee. The delegates urged them not to be afraid, stating they only came to ask a simple question: will there be work or not? The alleged arming of the workers' false reports and police response. Someone falsely reported to the Minister of the Interior that workers armed with clubs had invaded the Duma and were beating up the councilors. In response, the Duma was surrounded by police, soldiers, and Cossacks, turning it into a military camp. The report was repeated inside, causing a roar of laughter among the delegates. In a moment of humor, the delegates collected about 20 canes and umbrellas they were carrying and offered them to the councilors as their weapons. A tense negotiation. After prolonged arguments among the town councilors, the police and soldiers were withdrawn. The Duma then agreed to formally receive a smaller delegation of 14 on June 14th. The final demands. At the June 14th meeting, the workers' representatives again demanded a clear answer on whether public work would be organized. They presented a list of points, including the immediate start of public work, the allocation of the 360,000 rubles demanded for summer relief, and the release of 200 workers imprisoned for attending unemployed meetings. Victory. Under the intense gaze of the worker deputies watching from the railing, the town councilors voted on the proposal. Not a single one dared to vote against it. The Duma passed a resolution assigning 360,000 rubles for summer relief and commissioning the mayor to finally begin organizing public work. Organization of work begins. After the June 14th victory, the organization of public work finally advanced as the government, for political reasons, ordered the Duma to make concessions. The first projects included lifting the Halerna harbor to prevent flooding, which employed over 1,000 workers using hand labor, and establishing public workshops on the Kagurinsky Wharf to make bridge parts, which employed 1,500 workers on 2 shifts. Workers as managers. For 2 years, the St. Petersburg workers, through the Unemployed Council, effectively organized and managed these large industrial projects. They assigned people, supervised the work, and sought to raise the level of production, increasing efficiency. When it was discovered that the public works were very expensive and unprofitable, the council took action. The deputies' committee at the Kagurinsky Wharf introduced a form of piecework that did not violate the workers' collective interests. This innovation was a great achievement, reducing the cost of bridge building from 7 rubles per unit to 2 rubles, 80 kopecks. A school for revolutionaries. Malashev concludes that this experience was of great educational value for the working masses. It helped preserve the unity of the proletariat during a time of intense reaction, and provided a practical school for future leaders of Soviet industry, teaching them how to organize production, lead, and fight for their class aims. The end of the council. During the second half of 1907, political reaction intensified. Most of the leaders of the Unemployed Council were arrested or went underground. In 1908, the Tsarist government put an end to the public work projects. When the authorities moved to close the Kagurinsky Wharf workshops, they were so afraid of the workers that they first called out a battery of light artillery as a precaution.